One Step Ahead by Lundquist and Beslick.
Good morning. This is One Step Ahead Radio, and welcome to this week's session. It's the 2nd of August, and we are going to go through a couple of very interesting topics on this radio, which is one and only in this kind. I know that there are many other podcasts and things happening around the world, and people are listening to different things. But what we are trying to do here is give you a bit of a new insights and new angles to sustainability and ESG developments across the world. Enlighten some of the things that we believe is relevant for professionals and people in this space and field to see and feel, and also to learn new things, and also give them a bit of a food for thought. To see if we can bring the topics forward that are interesting, but also bring forward angles that could enrich your ability to act, and that is what we need to do. This week we have a very interesting agenda. We're going to touch upon a couple of interesting things. One of them, client-centric sustainability communication, obviously failing heavily across the world for various types of reasons and for various types of stakeholder related things. Very interesting, and I have invited James Osborne to join me, and he will do that later on in the radio show. But we'll start with a couple of other things. We will start with one particular thing that has come out yesterday, actually, which is related to Antarctica and the temperature rise 10 degrees Celsius above average in the near record heat wave. There are places apparently in the Antarctica where the temperature of the landmass, polar landmass, has reached 28 degrees Celsius above expectations on some days. The globe has experienced 12 months of record warmth, with the temperature consistently exceeding the 1.5 degrees Celsius rise above pre-industrial levels. That has been touted as the limit to avoid the worst climate breakdown. This is not really good, and it's not good from a perspective that in other parts of the world, like in China, and you can almost think this might be related to each other. Basically, China is experiencing the highest number of significant floods since the records began. So far this year, officials are warnings have been issued for 25 floods in China, and this is the country that is only halfway through its peak flood season. Things are accelerating at the level that we have not seen before, and the markets are reacting in a completely different way. You remember that I last time had a bit of an update on what is going on in insurance industry around the world, and insurance industry, especially in the US, is almost on the verge to collapse in many states because the insurance companies have decided not to insure people and the property that has been is affected by consequences of climate change, including floods and fires and weather storms and all kinds of natural related consequences skyrocketed by climate change. And you would expect that this would mean that the valuation of insurance companies that are listed on the stock markets around the world will actually go down. But in fact, investors, the mainstream investors around the world, are supporting insurance companies not to continue insuring property for people around the world, in this case in the US, on the climate damage, because that is something that will, of course, have a negative impact on their short-term revenues. So the mainstream finance is actively contributing and working against you and me and many others in terms of working for a more sustainable future, looking for its own short-term profits. Are we surprised on that? We are, of course, not surprised on that. And one of the things that I want to draw your attention to is the fact that, as we know, there are presidential elections in the US coming up, and this is something that is widely debated. Many countries are spending more time debating who's going to win in the US than who's going to win in their own countries, and most of that is, the reason is, of course, that the Western Hemisphere is US-centric in the way how they both benchmark themselves, but also how they benchmark some of the policies, especially on climate. So I did a bit of a deep dive on some of these things in relation to US, and I've come up with some interesting data that might be interesting for you as well, which is related to how the US actually develops its economic/environmental climate-related policies. And looking at it from the outside, when you look at the US, you actually don't look at the political parties per se. The Republicans and Democrats are, of course, different in the approach, in the theoretical and philosophical approach to climate change, as well as they are different in the way how they approach some of the challenges. But what they are actually not different on is the use of underlying economic engine in the US to support the needs of what somebody has called America First. And it's actually not America First. In the US, it's all about the money, and it's all about the markets, and it's all about the economy. And looking at that, what we have is the fact that many people don't know, and that is that under the Biden administration, the US has handed out 1,453 new oil and gas licenses, and this is accounting for half of the total globally, and 83% of all licenses handed out by wealthy nations. This is 20% more than during the term of Donald Trump, who is promised to drill, of course, drill, baby, drill, should he return back to the office. So looking at the Democratic and Republican policy changes or proposals on the paper looks really interesting, and especially in the favor of presidential candidate Harris. However, she has also withdrawn from some of the more, I would say, radical approaches to U.S. policy going forward, which is, of course, related to fracking. And instead of trying to curb the fracking, which is one of the most environmentally heavy ways of extracting fossil fuels, she's going to withdraw from some of these things in order to support the her candidature for president of the United States. And this goes back to many other things. Looking at China, of course, it's a different ball game. In China, it's actually politics or political agenda of Chinese Communist Party that runs the show. Economics is more or less secondary, and for Chinese government, in many cases, approach to climate and renewable energy expansion is related to security of the regime going forward, especially in regards to demographic changes, but also in the fact that social issues in China, due to the undelivered promises to Chinese middle class, are becoming more tenuous for government in China. And this is something, of course, related to a third sort of element of this, which is Europe. So in the US, it's all about the money. In China, it's all about the politics. And in Europe, what is it all about? In Europe, it's all about the national interest of different states. And Europe is struggling with having a unified front, both towards the US and also towards China, which is going to cost clients and customers and us quite a lot going forward. So with these words and this little update, I would like to sort of bring you forward to a topic which is very interesting, and it's growing interest in the topic, both I would say outside Europe, but also in Europe, and is related to sustainability communication. As you probably know, sustainability communication today, it's all about serving the regulators, serving the investors, and serving the academia. Who's reading sustainability reports? These three sort of main target groups are the ones. However, looking at the way how companies actually are owed to make money on sustainability, the clients and customers are very, very absent from the way companies communicate. So in that regard, I would like to invite James to join me in the call. And if we can just elaborate a bit, James, on why this is the case, and also in what way do you think that companies being more focused towards investors, regulators, and academia, how are they actually making money on sustainability? Do they really understand their clients?
Yeah, good morning, Sasha. Thanks again for the invitation and for having me today. It's a very good question, and I think it's a very big question. You could write a whole book on that question, I think, basically. And I think if you try and unpick it a little bit, one of the biggest chapters in that book is like asking do companies really know their clients? Do they know their customers from a sustainability point of view, right?
Yeah.
Very often, the case is not. A lot of companies approach sustainability, sort of from, as you said, from a reporting perspective. So they do stakeholder engagement, sort of for their materiality analysis, and they ask, maybe they'll ask their customers, what topics do you think are important to us? What are our impacts and everything? But they don't ask them about them. They don't say, hey, I want to hear, what's important to you and what kind of a person you are. We had this great example a few years ago with a big digital retail platform, online retail platform. And we had to persuade them to ask their customers, they're developing their strategy.
Despite the fact that they're a retail platform. So they actually didn't,
They knew their customers very well, right? They had this customer insight team who knew their customers inside out from a transactional point of view, but they didn't know them at all from a values point of view. And we finally persuaded them to give us access to sort of 5,000 top spenders or however many it was, and we asked them, like, what's important to you, what causes are important to you, what motivates you when you make purchases, and trying to unlock that whole part of the relationship that they'd never really even thought about before. And so, you very rarely find sales and marketing and customer insights sitting down with sustainability and
that's
saying,
interesting.
what do people really think, rather than asking them questions, about a very sort of corporate kind of questions, what's our sort of top, double materiality questions people, aren't capable of, or not interested in.
James, if you as an investor, I'm very sort of keen on understanding this, because of course when we speak to companies, when we ask them why they do things, they say, oh, we do it because we want to get more leverage from you as investors. And we as investors, we ask them how they actually make money on this. And if their clients don't understand this, they actually can't make money on this. So it's like a vicious circle. Do you think that this is something that companies are getting to understand now, something that they really need? I mean, from an investment point of view, they really need to focus on this. But it seems to be that they are just serving, regulators and I don't know, academia with all the reporting they do.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, there are many companies asking these questions, and that needs to come from the top level. It needs to come directly from the CEO of asking this question to all of their different teams, where it's sustainability and marketing and sales and so on and so forth. But it's also a question, I think, there's a short circuit here, because people then turn back and say, oh, well, customers aren't asking for this, or customers aren't interested,
Exactly.
And so, which they used to say a few years ago about investors. Oh, investors never ask us about ESG. And I think you actually have to cultivate that market. You have to help your customers in the first step, I think, of communicating to customers about sustainability is, sort of give them that awareness, give them that ideas about how that how this topic's going to influence, or maybe even just one topic. Maybe there's one thing that's really central to their view of the product.
Yeah, look, I mean, as investors, we are trying to find the center of gravity for every company. What we mean by that is, what are the drivers, sustainability topics, areas, business products and services, where clients are choosing company X instead of company Z because they are willing to pay more. I mean, I read some study, a McKinsey study about this, which basically said that, at least in the US, the study was done last year, the clients in a certain segment, especially on the retail side, are willing to pay up to 30% more if they knew what they were buying. I mean, it seems to be that people don't even understand. I mean, they don't read sustainability reports. They need information in another way.
And even more than that, it's not just that they don't read them and that they shouldn't read them, obviously, but that information isn't purposed for them, right? Because very often the data points that you have are kind of corporate level data points. As a business, we have this, whereas the customer wants to know about a single product or a single service.
Exactly.
And so you need like a value chain. You can't talk about the circularity of a product without knowing its full life and where you're supplying it from and all of that. So you need to sort of repackage all of your data and present it to them in a way that's actually useful for the people that say, okay, I'm buying product X. What's the impact of product X, rather than what's the impact of corporate Z that's, stands behind it.
James, thanks a lot. Look, we are close to ending the this week's one step ahead radio. And before sort of closing it, I'm thinking about, do you think that this is something that will change going forward? Do you see this happening? That companies, I mean, I heard the other day about the conversational banking. Do you think anything will change in terms of the conversational, I don't know, automotive industry or conversational whoever industry in terms of sustainability?
Well, I very much hope so. And I think from a European perspective, the whole CSRD journey that everyone's going through now, with mandatory reporting, not just in Europe, but very much so here, is going to force everyone, all main companies to report. And that's going to make, executive teams start to think about, okay, well, everyone else is saying the same thing as we're saying. And everyone's got this kind of baseline, where's our value add? Where's the return from this? Where can we find some kind of competitive advantage from that? And those are the questions that are going to drive the conversation that you're talking about, and saying, well, what do our customers want? What can we serve them? How can we innovate around their needs, rather than pushing them what we already have today? So kind of rethinking that's going to be key.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for participation. Thank you all for being listening to One Step Ahead Radio. Please join us next week. We will continue driving topics and exploring the areas that are necessary for us to understand. And I wish you all a great weekend. And we can talk again next week. Thank you very much for participation.
Thanks, Sasha. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.